Good evening, YouTuber subscribers and friends and like. It's Greg coming at you from Miles City, Montana. It's August 3rd, 2022. A subscriber, or a couple of these subscribers, hit me up on an update on what I'm doing because it's been like a month. And I've been on PTI, or Professional Transportation and Company, this job here locally for about a month now. It's been week 4, I think I just ended. Basically, the gist of the company, I can go into some basics of it. I can't go into the content any more than to say what I do. And essentially, they pay me to be on call here until the railroad needs us, and then they call us either by an automated system or our dispatch calls us. Then the driver, me or whoever, gets in the van, goes down to Forsyth, to the depot, or to wherever depot they send us to. You pick up the crew and you take them out to a train that's on a siding, that's been sighted on the siding. Or you do that in reverse. You go to the train and meet them at the siding and take off the crew that has ran out of hours for the day. Sometimes we do dog catching, which is a combination of the two, in which you go to the depot first and get the relief crew. Then you bring them out to the train at the siding, and then they do their little test talk thing with each other. And then you take the crew that's being relieved off, and usually right back to the same depot that you took that crew, that you picked the first crew up out of. That's what's called dog catching, because you're catching a train that's only stopped temporarily while you switch crews. Sometimes you do leapfrogging, which is kind of like dog catching, but it's taking like basically local yard crews that move trains up, like as they load a train and build it, or where they call it the cars together. They pull them up out of that yard into the next local siding, and you have to go catch them. That's yard work, basically yard radius work. You go up there and catch them, and then bring them back. But sometimes you do leapfrogging, in which you follow the train out there, you catch them, and you take them to the next train up, and they move the next train up to the next siding if that particular siding is long enough to fit this train. Like say one train's too long for one siding, and one train's too short for the next one, then you kind of basically leapfrog the trains and the crews. And so you would go put them on the shorter train so they can move the shorter train into the siding, and then you take them back to the other train that's longer, that they can move that out to a further longer out siding, or else they just head on their way and you're done with them. They get on the road and they go. But they have what's called leapfrogging for that. Then you do yard radius work. Sometimes we rarely do it because we're more over the road based drivers because of where our location is. But sometimes we fill in and do yard work or radius work or assist in a yard. A lot of times we go to our home area base depot here, which is Forsyth, which is 45 miles west of us, because Miles City's depot has been shut down a long time ago, and BNSF doesn't use it anymore. They own it, but they don't use it. It's been abandoned or whatever. It used to be a train track for Amtrak or whatever passenger train that went through here back in the day. But anyway, we would go down to Forsyth to do an assist, and any other the rail yards with Glendive and Laurel and other places you do an assist. And basically, to do that, you assist the conductor by picking them up. You usually pick both crews up at the depot, go out to the train, you drop the engineer at the lead locomotive so you can get it started, and then you take the conductor to the rear of the train, and they inspect the train basically both ways, and then they release the brakes or do an air test, or they split the train up if you have to split the train up to put different cars in the middle or whatever. And you basically follow them around with the van as they're doing that, and then that way when they're on long sections they can jump in with you in the van, and you can give them rides here and there. That way they don't have to walk it. But BNSF allows them, depending on the yard, they can walk up to a mile. Other yards they can walk up to 2.5 miles, or they are required to as part of their job, or they not required to, but they can go that distance at 2.5 miles without needing to have a van there. But sometimes they do that because it's easier and quicker, and they can do that rather than wait for a van that goes from 2.5 hours out. Sometimes if they dispatch us too far away, which Miles City sometimes is that, because we have to drive the distance to the depot instead of just go get in the van at the depot and go. Because basically radius and assist jobs are usually supposed to be for local drivers that are there right there in that town, like Forsyth or Glendive or Laurel. And they pay certain people to do that with the one van. They sit there hourly all day long, and they just do assist. We do over the road because of where Miles City is located at. We're kind of the backup branch for everybody else because we don't have our own depot here anymore. We technically do, but we don't use it. So this is basically work site, they call it here. And Miles City has 3 crossings and overpass, and basically the trains are allowed to just go right through 65 mile an hour through Miles City and not stop because the markers come down fast enough and whatever. So it's not a stopping point for BNSF anymore, but it used to be back in the day. It used to be a passenger train depot, but they quit that. But anyway, because of that, we fill in as a backup branch, and the majority of the time we end up going down to Forsyth to pick stuff up, crews up again, and then take them someplace. We can take them into North Dakota and take them up further into Glendive, Montana, which is east of us. We can take them to North Dakota, which is directly east of us instead of northeast. And then we can go down to a couple different mines that are around the area, or we sometimes pick them up down, or we take them down to Laurel, which is just past Billings, Montana. And on rare occasion, we take them clear across the state. But in general, the minimum that we do is about a 2-hour trip. The maximum that any of us is allowed to do, supposedly, is a 15-hour trip over to Great Falls. And we're only technically allowed that because it's a pain in the butt to assign 2 drivers and then get crews all lined up and everything, so it's very rare that you get those trips once or twice a month. But every now and then they send you on a 15-hour trip, which is right at the max of what we can do on our log. Well, actually, we're over log, but the general rules of guaranteed pay, or you work 12 hours and you're on call all the time now. Back in the day, I worked this back in the day when it was just hourly and just miles, and you were only paid for those trips, and that's it. And it wasn't a sustainable job. It was a nice hobby job. It was a great job for somebody who was retired already and had a fixed income and just wanted to go do something. It was great for that, but it didn't give you a fixed income. Nowadays, I think one time, I don't know for sure on the gist of it, but I think PTI got sued is the rumor, and then the labor laws and stuff like that, so they had to change stuff up. And now they made BNSF start paying us what's called guaranteed pay, which is a misnomer because it's not really guaranteed. You have to do certain stuff to make it sure that you get it. But PTI pays you per hourly for the trips that you take, and then BNSF will guarantee you the difference. And then it's different everywhere you go. I can't say it's going to be the same if you apply to a branch in Indiana or Kentucky or wherever, because they're all different. Some of them do hourly and miles like they were doing here before. Some of them are on this new guaranteed pay thing from BNSF. Some of them don't work with you with BNSF. They work with Union Pacific and stuff. And so everything's different depending on the company and the contract and where you're at and stuff. And here they went to guaranteed pay because it's hard to find people that will do the job, and then the really weird hours and time and amount of time it takes us to do it. Like you could sit there for a day and not do nothing, and then the next day get 6 to 12 hours worth of a trip all of a sudden because of how far you got to cover distance. And normally in other places, like let's say Evansville, Indiana, where the company's based out of, everything's within a 30-mile radius of what they need done, and they have offices, every 4 hour out or whatever, and so they just pick the van that's closest and they send it there and that's it. Well, out here in Montana, that's not the case. Especially with our branch, it's not the case because we are a backup cover branch. There's Glendive on this side of the map, let's say, and then there's Laurel, which is down here past Billings, and we're in the middle. And so because we don't have a actual home base, us and Forsyth are kind of backup branches for the 2 main ones. There's a main depot area with a 6, I can't remember, I think it was a 4-track yard up in Glendive, 4 tracks, and then Forsyth has 3 main tracks, and then Laurel and Billings and all that have like 6 or 8 on their lines, so they're a real big depot down there, but they're on the High Line. The section of track that runs through Laurel and Billings is the High Line and goes east to west, and it takes a lot of intermodal trains, which are the double container trains, and they basically go across the coast that way. Occasionally they'll send them up our spur line, because that's what we're on, is a spur line that's kind of more extra, and it's here for a couple different mines, and they load rocks on trains here, and they send coal trains up this way on the spur line to get them off the main line, so that the intermodals that have priority can stay on that line. But occasionally you'll see a double container intermodal go through Forsyth and get stationed there for a minute while they change crews and so on and move on, but that's very rare because they usually take the priority line. And anyway, that's basically what our line is. We just cover this spur line, and there's a couple of spur lines off of it that go to mines and everything else, and then it's the line that goes up into North Dakota, over to Minnesota, and ends at like the Twin Cities, I think, because that's why they call it a spur line. It only goes from Billings, basically, to Twin Cities, and then it has branches of railroad that go to different places in North Dakota and different mines and like coal refinery areas and stuff. Same thing as Wyoming, kind of. And then there's a main line that goes through Billings the other way, that's straight east and west, that goes Billings, Sheridan, Gillette, Rapid City, South Dakota, and pretty much all that way. And that one is high priority coal trains and high priority double container stack intermobiles go on that one. And that's the gist of the information that I know currently that I could say, because I'm not telling you any time schedules, like when this train or that train goes through. That's all security purposes. They don't let us do none of that. But I can tell kind of like the basics of what you could expect on this line or that line, because rail fans follow that all the time anyway. It wouldn't be no different. Anybody can look it up in public. Technically, anybody can look up the schedule of a train on different websites anyhow, but I'm not going to spread the information on YouTube. But that's the gist of what I do. I've done 4 weeks of it now. This isn't my first time. I did it 5 or 6 months in 2020, according to MIDI. So that was 2 years ago, the first time. But like I say, back in the day, that was more of a hobby job. They didn't pay you a consistent rate of pay like they're doing now. Now I came back because I both have friends here, and then this so-called guaranteed pay, basically PTI pays you your hourly wage for the hours that you're on a trip, and then BNSF will pay the difference up to $150 a night on contract. And that's another public contract, so I can talk about it, but I do have to disclaimer that you're not going to get that everywhere you go. If you apply for PTI in a different branch somewhere else, in like Wyoming or Indiana or wherever, it's different by state, because the state only allows them to do stuff, and then different by contract for different areas, because they do and don't need it. Up here in Montana, most of Montana, they've gone to guaranteed pay for all of us the road drivers, because of the really weird hours. Some days you sit there and do nothing. Other days you take a 6 or 12 hour trip. Other days you take a 2-hour trip. Other days you take a 4-hour trip, and they want somebody to basically sit around and wait. But they, back in the day, didn't want to pay for that. They wanted a retiree back in the day that had the time on their hands, and then could still go jump in the van at any notice, any call in for a certain point of time that worked. But then they realized, safety concerns wise, then they're getting a whole bunch of old people that may or may not be able to see and everything. Not that they're basing it off of that alone, but from a safety standpoint, and where we live at, where you have wildlife like deer and birds and everything else that can happen on the road, they wanted to get basically somewhat younger people in there, so that hopefully their eyesight's better, and their cognitivity and blah 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 is all better. But they couldn't do that because it's normal. People that are not retired yet still have to have an income, and so they were realizing that people would only take this job on for 2 days at a time as a secondary job, fixed days, Saturdays, Sundays, or whatever, on the weekend, because that's all they could do. And a lot of people have kids and family and everything else, and so it doesn't fit in with their job. But my job is both good in ways, like easy ways, like a couple days a week right now, because it's slow, but it depends on the time. A couple days a week here, I've been averaging just sitting around here doing this right here and getting paid for it. Tonight I'm actually off, but I had nothing else to do. But anyway, so in a way it's good, because I just sat there and made money and didn't do anything. But then there's other days, like Tuesdays are notorious for me for just being back-to-back trips, and I max out my hours every Tuesday. The last 4 Tuesdays in a row, they're just whoo, like I work all one day of the week or something. I mean, I work more than that, but it feels like it some days. Tuesdays are busy, and at different times of the year it's going to change, because right now they're loading rock trains, I think it was, and then sometimes the coal trains pick up, and then other times of the year they have the intermobile trains that pick up. So depending on the time of year, we might be going to Laurel more often for the intermodal trains that go east to west, or other times of the year we're going on our spur line to pick up rock trains. Right now they're doing rock trains, and sometimes every 3 years or something like that, they circulate a world track work team through to redo the tracks. And so you'll have to take them out too, slightly different than the railroad crews. And I got to do that in 2020, some of that, where you take them out to their trucks and stuff. So it's not automatically just to the train tracks, it's to the depots or the hotels or their trucks or their shops or whatever. It's a little bit different work. I mean, basically the same thing, you just drive them to wherever. But so I'm just saying that the job changes as you go, and then I'm looking forward to this winter. Basically learning how to drive in Montana in the wintertime. I mean, I know how to drive already. I'm born and raised in South Dakota, so I know bad weather. I'm not scared of that. It's just the combination of bad weather and then really weird wildlife. Like lately, for instance, I go into some stories of what I just seen in the last 4 weeks. I saw a deer go across the road, and I saw it in enough time that I slowed down. And I thought, oh, I'm good. I didn't even set the camera off, nothing. Here come a coyote chasing that deer, and of course, I seen him last second and had to lock it up, and it set the camera off. They have cameras in the vans that watch your driving and stuff, so they know where you're at, and if you get in a wreck, they can find you and stuff. Anyway, so I was able to catch that on camera, so dispatch has it. I didn't have my own dash camera, so I didn't get it, but I got to see it, where the deer got chased across the road by a coyote. That was pretty cool. The next week, on that, like pretty much the next Tuesday, I think it was, I was driving along, and in the passing lane, I saw a coyote just going at this deer. That's what he did, so I hit it. He was just tearing that deer up like he hadn't eaten a week. His head just flying this way and that way, and it was one of the coolest sights I've ever seen in my life, in terms of wildlife. Just tearing it up. I wish I could have got that on my own camera for content for YouTube, and I'm in discussion about it, but they have to get somebody high enough up to approve it. And the two things about it is you can't have audio in the van, for security purposes. You can't hear what the engineers and all them are saying. And then the other thing is they haven't decided whether they're going to okay a straight out the window front view dash cam that's for personal use, just for the road, just to see the road, because it could be a liability issue. Because down the line, if I got in a wreck, I can try and claim it was this and not show whatever they had evidence of, and then I do have evidence, and so content wise, I don't think I'm going to be able to do anything but tell you what it is I saw while I was out driving, because I just don't see it being able to do it without somebody or another higher enough up deciding that that's something that they don't want to deal with and could potentially terminate me and all this other crap. So it's just, for right now, I'm not doing anything, but I'd love to be able to get the content for you guys. Unfortunately, I'm gonna probably have to wait and get my own personal camera, dash cam for my vehicles, and then if I happen to see something while I'm driving someplace, which is probably rare now because I drive for work, but if I were to, then I'd have it. But anyway, coming back from North Dakota the other day, I saw a set of deer in a big old buck twice the size of a doe, and they were literally at the North Dakota and Montana state line, like they planned it almost. And he was huge, and then she's just little bitty, and they were like kissing each other and rubbing each other's noses right there across the road. And I had to slow down and stop and everything. The thing about these cameras is you can't do anything besides you can use a straw to drink, but that's it. You can't pick up the phone or go off and say you're distracted. You can't eat or say you're distracted. Can't smoke in the vans, a whole bunch of stuff. But anyway, the point being, when I saw that deer, I wanted to take a video or a picture of it for you guys. But of course, by the time I get the van all the way stopped and then in park because when you're in park, then you can do whatever because the camera is hooked in with the car, and so it knows you're in park at that point. But I put it in park, and I tried to get my phone up there as fast as I could, and it didn't matter. They saw me, they seen me stop, and everything was at night. And I scared them away before I could get it on video. And that's happened 2 or 3 times now. The ones with the coyote that tore the deer up. Had a big old falcon come down and about hit the windshield the other day. It's a bunch of interesting sights from wildlife. I about hit a cow once too because I went over the cattle guardrail thing out by a rock mine, and I totally forgot that they have a free range pasture there, and I was going slow enough. I was going 55 or 60, And it was daytime this morning. It was just starting to be daylight. And good thing it was, because here's this black cow. When I jumped over the hill, I was like, woo! About nailed a cow, and I probably would have had no excuse in that one. At least with wildlife, there's the excuse of, you didn't see it coming or whatever. But a big ass cow is twice the size of normal wildlife. I had no excuse there because I went through that guardrail, that cattle guard, and knew I was in free range pasture, and it just didn't dawn on me because of the time of night, and I'd been driving all night. But I didn't hit it. But I'm just saying, things like that happen all the time, wildlife wise, and then even tame animals wise, I guess now after I am. That I wish I could get on video, but all I can do at the moment is talk to you on the camera in terms of content related to my job and what all I do there. And right now we use a Ford Expedition and a Ford Windstar minivan, I think. And I'm not all too sure. The only thing I can think of why they bought the minivan was to save fuel mileage, because those Ford Expeditions get about 13 miles to gallon or something. They're not the greatest, but they have four-wheel drive, and you're able to put them in lower gear, four-wheel drive automatic. And they're able to take a lot of people still, because they could seat 2 in front, 3 in the middle, and if you squeeze them in, 3 in the far back. So technically you could seat about 8 adults in there half decently comfortably, and their cargo, and be able to tow something. So they're a pretty big SUV, and they have 4x4 capability, and then they're high enough off the ground that you can get on the sidings of tracks to get backed up to crew and stuff. So they're nice to have, but they're not the greatest in fuel mileage. So we have a minivan, like a Ford Windstar, and I don't know, our company decided to put it out here, and that's another one of those deals where a company would have that would be great over in Indiana, where they're originally out of. That would be great for a lot of flat land and hardly any winter and everything. That would just be great, it's minivan traveling weather over there. Over here, not the case. I mean, summertime it's fine, but again, the distance that we drive, we can sometimes take a trip that takes up to about 500 miles, and in one of the Ford Expeditions, it costs about like $130 in gas lately. But the main thing is it has a big enough fuel tank that even fully loaded like that, it can take you and go all the way back to Miles City before you have to fill up, which is really nice luxury to have, because when you have these minivans, it's not the case. They make half the way, depending on how much weight you got in there, and they make half of it, and then you have to fill up twice or 3 times. And it's okay, that's within our job to do that anyway, to make sure the fuel is full, and the window wipers and all that are all working, and lights, and we wash the windows all the time throughout our trip to make sure the windows are clear so you can see it, and stuff like that. That's all part of our job anyhow. But I'm just saying those expeditions are better in terms of distance wise, and where we're located at here, there's a lot of distance we cover in one trip, and those minivans just don't really cut it. And they would for an assist out of Forsyth to somewhere on the siding near Forsyth, because that's only a couple hours and it's well within their fuel range. They get about, I don't know, probably about 300 mile range, which sounds like a lot, but routinely we're doing 500 miles at a shot. It just depends on where you go. But we do anywhere from about a minimum of 2 hours to a maximum of 15 hours. The majority of our trips fall somewhere in the 6 to 8 hour range, give or take, because we cover a lot of distance, because Miles City is in the middle of the main depots. So we have to drive there, and then we get the crew, and then drive them to where they're going, and then drive all the way back to Miles City. And between all that, we cover a lot of distance. But that's basically the gist of the video. It's going to get pretty long here, so I'm going to cut it off at this. That's the gist of what I've got right now for the content of the video, and I will put in the thumbnail, if I remember to do so, hopefully, a picture from PTI at a sighting that I was at the other day, with the sunset in behind it. You have to choose between one of the two of them. And one of these days I want to try and, if I remember it, back into the Hathaway sighting, or one of the sightings that's straight, and then that way I can get a picture of the van next to the train for you all. Because we can do basic stuff like that, but we can't necessarily say where the picture was taken or what train it was. I may or may not have to take the train number off, to Photoshop it off before I can put it on the video, and the license plate's the same, take the plates off, Photoshop the plates off before I can post the van, stuff like that. I haven't figured out exactly the specifics on that content yet. I know some of it is confidential and I can't talk about like what the railroad says or how it, specifically they do this or that with that this or that train. All of that for security reasons. I can't say what this train or that train does and when they're going to be at this place and that place. You can somewhat look it up sometimes, but for their own security purposes, I can't go into too much details on the radio channels, on the all that stuff, because work related. You know, in a perfect world, I wish I could show you step by step what you do. That way, if you wanted to get hired on with VTI, you could be like, oh, I only got to do this and this and that and that, and that's it. But in this day and age, anybody can sue for any information they can get and all this other stuff, and it's not worth the hassle of getting into it. So I try to keep things as vague as I can, while still being detailed enough that you can understand what I do for a living. But with that, like and subscribe, leave comments. Hopefully you stuck around this long for the video, and if you did, you're one of my true subscribers, so I thank you very much for that, and I'll catch you on the flip. Peace.
Say firework day.